I took a trip to Spain this summer. My girlfriend, Robin, and I started in Granada in the south. We stayed in a charming little bed and breakfast just off an ancient cobblestone path leading up to the grand red palace known as Alhambra. We walked around the city, ordered drinks at bars, just to get delicious tapas, and, most thrillingly, got engaged in the beautiful gardens of the Alhambra. It was the best vacation of my life. Until we went to Barcelona. That's not to say Barcelona isn't a beautiful, welcoming city, because it absolutely is. We stayed in a hotel outside Eixample. We ate more tapas and celebrated our new engagement. On the second to last day of our trip, however, we decided to pull ourselves away from Jamon long enough to visit something we had always wanted to see: the Basilica de la Sagrada Familia. If you've never heard of Sagrada Familia, Google it right now. It's simply one of the most stunningly beautiful buildings in the world. It's a church that famous Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí began constructing in 1852, and it looks like a structure from Tim Burton's Halloween Town was airdropped into a modern city. Gaudí never actually got around to finishing it. It's technically not finished even now, with a local government promising to wrap things up in 2026, the 100th anniversary of Gaudí's death. Neither Robin nor I are particularly religious. She's a lapsed Catholic, and I'm a lapsed nothing. But you don't need to be in touch with the Holy Spirit to marvel at the artistic and architectural brilliance that is the Sagrada Familia. We arrived midday on a Thursday to a much larger crowd than we anticipated. We had purchased tickets beforehand, but still needed to navigate a long security line. Once we made it through and onto the promenade of the building itself, I could only stare up in awe. Up close, you would swear that the thing was built by the angels themselves. The Sagrada Familia offers self-guided tours in which you visit a kiosk, select your language, and receive a bulky cell phone-like device that you can place against your ear and listen to facts about the Basilia as you walk along. We selected English, grabbed our phones, and advanced to a sign near the entrance that had a 1 on it. We picked up our audio devices and pressed the play button. Sure enough, the little display on the front read, 1. Welcome. I brought the phone up to my ear and began listening to a British woman's soothing voice emanate from the receiver. Number 1. Welcome. Welcome to the Basilia de la Sagrada Familia. In this section, you can see a map of the Basilia. Take your time to examine the floor plan and imagine what the cathedral inside may look like. As you advance, explore the Basilia. You will see numbered signs alerting you to listen and learn more about the pride of Barcelona. I smiled at my fiancée as she pulled her device away from her ear. We took some time to examine the map in front of us and the massive, pearly facade behind us. After a brief search for the second sign, we found it closer to the church's entrance. We counted the 3 and hit our play buttons at the same time, holding them back up to our ears. Number 2. The Basilius Origins. Architect Francisco del Paula del Villar began construction on the Sagrada Family in 1882, but left the project just a year later due to disagreements with the direction of the Basilia. Antoni Gaudí then took over, recognizing the unique opportunity to keep evil in bondage. Gaudí knew that ancient Iberian texts uncovered in the 19th century revealed that the entity known as the Dread, or the No Thing, was buried under enchanted soil in the Catalan lands north of the Mediterranean. I pulled the device away from my ear again and looked at Robin to see if her face was showing the same signs of confusion mine surely was. But the little black box remained at her right ear, and she was looking up serenely at the cathedral's many spires. Hesitantly, I began to listen again. In fact, it is theorized that the turmoil in Spain following Napoleon Bonaparte's brief occupation may have been due to the influence of the dread gathering strength from within the earth's mantle. The primitive spells from Iberian tribes could only keep the no thing restricted for so long. So, Gaudi sought to create a holy and mystical structure to make sure that the dread's influence would terrorize Europe no more. Please continue to the next station. I looked down at the device in my hand, expecting to see some sort of error message. Instead, the text, Number 2, the Basilius Origins, glowed back at me, just visible in the sun's glare. What was this? The dread? The no thing? Had I picked up the wrong box? What did you think? I asked Robin as we walked towards the front facade. So cool, she said. I didn't know the spires were supposed to represent Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Jesus, but I suppose that makes sense. Right, I said. Definitely cool. We were in front of the facade now, and Robin was so excited that she began listening to the next portion without synchronizing with me. Feeling uneasy, I pressed play and brought the device to my ear. Number 3, the Nativity facade in the east and its corresponding Passion facade to the west are crucial to keeping the dread locked in and safely under the Basilia. The ancients knew that evil could be suppressed with magic, but didn't possess the technological capabilities to bind that magic with the physical world, creating an effective barrier. Gaudi knew that if the no thing was to stay entombed, the Basilia would need a gate. Gaudi turned to the Nativity and Passion Gospels from the New Testament. Constructed between 1894 and 1930, the Nativity facade was the first and most important facade to be completed. As it was constructed, some workers reported hearing growls. In the center, just above the main archway, you can see the marble statue of Mary, Joseph, and the Christ child. Upon its completion, the sculptor, Francisco Olivas Oros, began to bleed from his palms. Gaudi's workers rejoiced at the sight of the stigmata before the man began to bleed from his eyes as well. He died, emaciated and drained, and was buried far away from the cursed grounds. Gaudi routinely consecrated the facade with holy water and prayer during construction. Still, at least 3 more men were driven mad and died at their own hand. One more, Guillem Domingo y Acosta, went missing for 6 days, and his body eventually reappeared, inside out, next to the Barnabas statue he had helped create. At the base of each column lies a turtle and a tortoise. Ancient sources suggest the dread may fear them. Periodically, the front gate will spontaneously drip blood and eventually form into untranslatable runes. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Barcelona has a special team of exorcists in place to monitor the facade and cleanse with holy water as needed. Please continue to the next station. I stood, rooted in my spot on the pavement, the Sagrada Familia before me. Suddenly, the Basilia seemed much more sinister and imposing than before. I could see Mary, Joseph, Jesus, and the turtles that the voice described, but I could barely comprehend everything else. Hey, I think something may be wrong with my listen-y thing, I said to Robin. What's wrong? Is it not saying anything? She said. For some reason, in that moment, I knew I couldn't tell her what I had heard. This is not the kind of thing that happens. Not the kind of thing that happens to a normal person, at least. Yeah, it's just, really quiet. The lady is like barely audible. That sucks. Let's switch listen-y things for the next round then. Maybe I can hear it better. I was grateful to get the cursed objects away from me, but I didn't want to let my love in whatever prank was happening here. Still, curiosity got the best of me. I wanted to know what she'd hear. Sure, I said. We entered the building for the first time, and a chill rushed through me. The sweat I had gathered on my neck from that hot summer day turned to ice. We were in a stained glass forest now. Huge, tree-like marble columns extended into the sky, and the sun worked through the glass to cast the air itself in a warm red glow. The colours inside were vibrant, to the point that they felt sinister. The arched ceiling seemed to reach just as high into the heavens as the towers outside. More statues of religious figures dotted the hive-like walls surrounding me, each of them bearing down with a level of stern urgency. The room itself seemed to be breathing, pulsating with some powerful energy. With a ping of panic, I realized that my fiancée was already listening to the haunted black box. I looked at her face to see if she was disturbed by what she heard. She did not seem to be. I began listening to my new device as well. Number 4. Materials used. Sagrada Familia is an architectural marvel. On March 19th, 1882, the first stone was laid during a ceremony hosted by the Bishop of Barcelona, Josep Ureña. In the time since, many more stones have been placed along with some other materials that make up the beautiful, serene cathedral. First and foremost, the bell towers that were constructed during Gaudi's lifetime are made from Montjuic sandstone. This device was normal. Maybe it was just a problem with mine. I thought I'd feel relieved, but what I felt instead was the still, oppressive environment around me. I looked over at Robin, and her face didn't betray any sort of surprise at what she was hearing. Seemed like she was learning about Montjuic sandstone too. "Hey babe, can I have my old thing back? This one sounds a little quiet to me too. It must just be my ears. I don't want you to have to deal with my sweat on the receiver." She seemed confused and a little annoyed, but she handed over my old device all the same. After I handed hers back, I resumed listening. In the end, the project is constantly evolving, and so will the materials needed to keep the dread at bay. God damn it. The device didn't even wait for me to press play again, but continued on its own to the next section. Number 5. The forest and interior of the Basilia. In prehistoric times, the Iberians would plant the tallest trees in the meadow upon which the cathedral now stands in an attempt to create a canopy to quarantine the dread's influence. It proved somewhat effective, as even though the woods came to be shunned by birds and animals, but not turtles of course, instances of ritualistic suicides and death cults diminished through the region. But as the Iberians died out, and new cultures took control of the area, forests were raised, and darkness spread across the continent once more. Gaudi paid homage to the original inhabitants of the land by constructing the pillars inside to resemble towering marble trees, as their effect had undeniable impact. In recent years, the columns have come to resemble bones more, as the dread slowly trickles its evil influence into the structure of the building itself. The nave is still used for occasional services today, but during the construction of the interior, workers would split into two groups, one that would work on the interior and the other to kneel at the altar and pray continuously. It is known that an idle mind is most susceptible to the no-things influence, so Gaudi was careful to make sure every builder was either working or praying at all times. In a 1924 journal entry by Gaudi, he describes a tense moment in which a kneeling worker was only pretending to pray to receive a break from the demanding physical labor. While at the pew, the unnamed man burst into flames and burned down an entire section of the chamber. Please continue to the next station. I looked over to the open-air sanctuary on the cathedral's north side. I tried to imagine the little collection of pews being devoured by flames. For a split second, I thought an inferno into existence, but it was just a sunbeam puncturing the red vein of glass from the structure's ceiling. I looked to the ceiling and caught sight of the marble's columns around me. The narrator wasn't wrong. They looked like bones now, some kind of ribcage inside the Grand Leviathan. The building felt more alive than ever before. Slightly lightheaded, I grabbed Robin's hand and frantically searched for station number 6. This had to almost be over. I don't know how much more I could take. Unaware of my distress, Robin dragged me to the hallway just beyond the sanctuary, to where a sign reading 6 stood. As if in a trance, I clicked play once more. Number 6. The Crypt. Look at the hallway's eastern wall and see if you can find a window near its base. Through this window, you can see another sanctuary, smaller than the one on the main level. Sure enough, the view from the window revealed a dimly lit sanctuary below ground. I could see quiet rows of handsome wooden pews, all positioned in front of the elevated platform. On the nave was something that seemed to resemble a gleaming white coffin. Antoni Gaudi lost his mind in the summer of 1926. As the main architect behind the project, he sustained exposure to the most constant levels of the dread's evil influence as anyone else involved. For the months preceding his death, he reported feeling more forgetful and oft depressed. In the final week, however, he would frequently break away from the medical staff and frantically dig through the earth just outside of the cathedral. He refused all food and drink and died on June 5th, 1926. It was later reported that he was struck by a tram and died in hospital to protect the man's integrity. Gaudi is entombed here in the crypt below the Sagrada Familia itself. This section is the darkest of the Basilia's chambers and is where the dread's influence is felt most acutely. Whereas it is usually safe to occupy the main level of the Basilia for several hours, the chamber below is considered unfit for human habitation and is only ever occupied for 10-minute shifts for emergency repairs. Please continue to the final station. I could not continue. In fact, I couldn't move. My eyes were riveted to the dusty white coffin in the room below. That's where Antoni Gaudi was, the man who took it upon himself to defeat the dread, or at least contain it. Wait, no, that's not real. None of this is real. I blinked, and my eyes were drifted to the pews in front of the casket. There were shadowy, human-like forms in a seated position around the pews. Suddenly, the lights in the sanctuary grew darker. I felt a hand on my shoulder and immediately screamed. "Oh, are you okay, babe?" Robin asked, removing her hand from my shoulder quickly. I looked around the hallway. A handful of tourists were looking at me, trying to find the source of the shriek. "Yeah, I'm okay. I guess I just spaced out for a bit. Actually, I think I might be getting sick or something. Can we go outside?" "Of course," Robin said. "Actually, I think that's where our tour ends anyway." "How do you know?" I asked. She held up a listening device, which was displaying the text, "Number 7, goodbye." As we exited the Basilia through the opposite door from which we entered, as soon as my face felt the open air again, I felt like a tremendous burden had been lifted from my shoulders. Blood and heat rushed back through my body, and my glasses fogged up. In front of us was a sign reading Number 7, so we walked towards it and looked back up at the imposing structure. The Passion facade before me was a twisting panorama of tan bones and white statues. I pressed play one last time. Number 7, goodbye. Construction on Sagrada Familia slowed after Gaudi's death and eventually stopped altogether. The consequences were immediately apparent as influence of the No Thing spread. Fascism took hold in Spain and Europe fell once again into war, eventually bringing the rest of the world along with it. Once the dread was momentarily sated with the blood of 90 million souls, a new architect, Francesc Quintana, once again took up Gaudi's mission. Construction on the Passion facade, the final piece of Sagrada Familia's sacred puzzle, began in 1954. Though many of Quintana's workers reported hearing inhuman growls throughout the construction of the project, and no fewer than 6 more men committed suicide, The facade was structurally complete by 1974. The nothing has been considered largely contained since 1974, though important work in Sagrada Familia of adding mystical ornamentation continues. Every day that the Basilius stands is a well-won victory against the spread of dread, though our world may never truly know peace until the holy structure is finished. Thank you for visiting Sagrada Familia. Please return your listening device to the nearest attendant. We did as we were told and began the short walk back to the metro station. Robin was abuzz with all the exciting new facts she had learned about the symbols in the holy structure. I didn't say much. Life went on, and we returned from our trip. Vacation pictures were posted, early wedding plans were made. But sometimes, late at night, when it gets real quiet, I swear, I can hear a low buzzing, sort of like a growl.